Hello, and welcome to the mentorDINO YouTube channel. I'm your host, Caitlin Rossier. I am an architect and founder of mentorDINO. Each week, I interview amazing professionals in and around the architecture, engineering, and construction industry to help foster learning, growth, and inspiration in others. Thank you all to our current subscribers, and if you're new, we'd love to have you join our community. So hit subscribe. It really does help others be able to discover this resource. So let's dive in. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Welcome, everyone, to the mentorDINO podcast. I would like to welcome Dani Schroeder, transportation engineer at Gannett Fleming in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Thank you so much, Dani, for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you, Caitlin, for having me.
And so, if you don't mind, could you introduce yourself to tell my listeners kind of a little bit more about your experience and your initial journey on becoming a transportation engineer?
Yeah, so my background is I graduated from Drexel University in 2017 with both my bachelor's and master's in civil engineering. And since then, I've been working in the transportation industry in private consulting. I've worked for two different private consulting firms, and I've worked on a variety of projects, including the retrofit of the Burlington-Bristol Bridge and other cool projects throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Awesome. So when you say transportation engineer, are you just focused on bridges? Are you doing vehicle movement? What are kind of the different avenues you can take with that?
Sure. So I personally more work on bridge retrofit reconstruction. Retrofit, for folks who don't know, is more when I do STEM outreach, I call it you're putting a Band-Aid on something. It's a small problem area that you're focusing on, where reconstruction is usually like a huge portion of it that needs to be modified to, extend the life of the bridge. But primarily working on bridge projects, but there's a lot to those bridge projects other than just the bridge that I work on. But civil engineering can go into a variety of different parts of things in terms of like traffic signals, road pavement markings, detour plans when we have to close a bridge. There's so many other things that are in that transportation field that I don't work on, but a lot of my colleagues do.
Yeah. I know you said you had your bachelor's and master's at Drexel. Myself having an architecture background, what are kind of those initial steps you take through your education process for civil engineering? Because I know I work with a lot of civil engineers on the building construction side. Is there any decision points you have to make along that process?
Yeah. So I'll go off of my personal experience. The Drexel program was 5 years. And I'll say that first year was pretty much just, I'll call it general engineering. And by that, I mean, it was getting your math classes and a lot of your science classes that I think most, if not all of our engineering majors were going through at the same time. So if you started as a civil engineer as your major and then chose to go to mechanical engineering or electrical, you had a lot of the same classes. But this was like your calculus, your multivariate calculus, physics, chemistry, all of those were kind of that first year. And then kind of the second year or so, it starts to get into more of those civil engineering specifics. So under the umbrella of civil engineering, there's water resources. So we had like hydraulics, hydrology, geotechnical, so talking about different foundations, structural, which is both our horizontal, so bridges and other structures, and then vertical, like our buildings, and a variety of different things. So you kind of get into a little bit of every little subdiscipline as part of the ABET accreditation. And then kind of continues there. And then I would say maybe in my third year, you kind of had to start talking more about that concentration of what of those classes of the water resources, structural, geotechnical, transportation that you really liked. And if you want to kind of have a focus in that. Some places it's specifically a minor if you do enough classes, but more of a focus in that. And then, as I mentioned, I have both my bachelor's and master of science, so I was also balancing grad classes at the same time as undergrad classes during my last 2 years of at Drexel.
Awesome. And then I know after graduation and you start the process, I know for architects, we've got experience hours, we call them, and then multiple exams. I know for engineering, it's more an FE, PE. Can you kind of explain the process you went through with that?
Sure. So my PE or professional engineering journey started my senior year of college. So I took the FE or Fundamentals of Engineering exam my senior year of college. And then once I graduated, and you have to graduate from an ABET accredited engineering program, then I applied to my local, typically a state board, for my EIT or EI, depending where you are. So EIT would be engineering and training, or EI is engineering intern. Just really depends on the local board that you're applying to. Once that was approved, then I became an EIT in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And then again in Pennsylvania, I personally needed to get relevant work experience before I could go to that next exam. In Pennsylvania, this is 4 years of working under a licensed engineer. And then there's some paperwork for this part of it. So it's kind of almost putting together all those 4 years of working experience and showing how you have kind of progressed throughout that time of getting to, for let's give the bridge, for example, maybe at first you were just working on the substructure of the bridge. And then you started, going through different designs of those pieces. And then by the end of it, you're designing the entire bridge, both the super, sub, bearings, all the bells and whistles of the bridge. So showing that through your amplified record that you apply, again, to that same local board. And then once that's submitted and approved, then we go on to the last exam, which is the PE exam, or the Principles and Practice of Engineering exam. And then once you pass that, then you submit that to your board, and then you can become a licensed professional engineer in that specific state. I will say, as you heard me talk about it many times throughout this, that I said specifically Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, because this does vary a little bit depending on the board that you're applying for. Like, for example, in California, there are 2 additional exams that you have to pass on seismic and survey, respectively, before you can become a licensed PE for that board. So results may vary in terms, or steps may vary, I guess is the better way of putting it.
Yeah, and I know some states, I'm newer to having engineers in my office, to actively seeing them go through their PEs and understanding that even the experience hours versus when you can take the exams are different by state as well. Whereas architecture, that's kind of standard, that you can kind of do that process simultaneously. And then you get to California and then it's a whole nother exam. Yeah. Which I'm perfectly fine not practicing in California. I think if I went into structural engineering, I would stay away from the West Coast. I don't think my stress level could handle it.
Stress level? Is that an intentional joke there?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I agree. I understand why they have those different parts, especially of being in a seismic area like California. But yes, I am also glad to not be working on projects over there.
And then is your PE just civil engineer? And then you can do transportation, or does that get granular?
Yeah, so my PE is in civil engineering, but that kind of goes into the ethics part of it. So what my license gives me is I get the stamp that I can stamp plans. So I'm only supposed to stamp plans that I have worked on and that I have the competence to sign. So that's where it kind of gets into that. It's really what your expertise are. If you're both an expertise in signals and pavement marking and erosion and sediment design, then you can be stamping all of those things. But if you're not the person working on all of those things and have that background in all of those things, then you shouldn't be stamping them, if that makes sense.
Definitely. And I know you're newly licensed, so congrats on getting through that process. Do you have any advice for young professionals that are starting the exam side of their process?
I'll start with the PE and then I'll work backwards.
Works for me.
for the folks that are studying or getting ready to submit the application for the PE, or even just newly graduating, make sure that you're documenting that 4 years of a progressive engineering experience, or how many years you need. I'm not saying every single detail, not every single, I went to this chapter of this specification to do that, but having a high level of what you worked on will help you when you're putting together the application, and make it a little bit easier. And then in terms of the studying for either the PE exam or the FE exam, make sure that you're using the references that you're going to have applicable to you. I don't know about the architecture exams, but all of our exams are now CBT, or computer-based testing, so you have to go to a Pearson Center to take them, and you're only going to have the digital version of, in the FE example, you have only the FE reference handbook, and then in the PE example, you have the PE reference handbook, and then the applicable standards that you know beforehand. So getting used to those standards in their digital form and understanding what you need to search for to get the equation that you need is so important to that studying process, for passing those exams.
Yeah. Can you do like a control F to like find certain words,
yes.
to make it faster?
Yeah. I will say you can do control F. It's not as relevant. It's not relevant to the FE, but it's relevant to the PE. Certain of the applicable design standards you'll have reference to, you can only search by chapter, which kind of makes sense because these are, huge standards that we're working on. So making sure that you understand, I need to go to chapter 15 for this specific thing, and then you can search through chapter 15 as part of it.
Yeah, I know I took not the current version of the architecture exam. I took the previous one, and now they have everything on the screen, and you can't even have a piece of paper. And I remember, like, before my structural exam, I went in and I just, like, word vomited all over my sheet. Just every equation I could remember that I knew wasn't given to me, because they only gave you a few. Just so, like, I could just brain dump before I lost it all. So I don't know what I would do if I could just brain dump everything and then backtrack.
Yes.
But, and you have to go to a testing center still. Nothing's okay. Because I know architecture now you can do it all digitally at home. So I wouldn't want to do that, because I have way too much, like, this side is clean of my office. This side is not. I don't think they would approve it as a spot to go. So jumping into kind of what types of projects civil engineers can do. I know you're more transportation. What other avenues could you take? Could you have taken your education and gone geotechnical and earthwork? Like, what are the options?
Yeah. So I like to say civil engineers are named as such because we're the ones that work on things needed for civilization. So while you can technically live without a cell phone or ever flying on an airplane, it's hard to say that you don't use things civil engineers design on a daily basis. So including the roads and bridges you drive on, or the public transportation you use to commute, the water you use to turn on a faucet or flush a toilet. So that would be our water resources engineers or hydraulic engineers. There's lots of different names of that. Or even civil engineers. Some of our structural engineers are working on some really cool things like sports stadiums, dams, and even roller coasters. So there's a lot of different things that you can be working on post graduation with a civil engineering degree.
Yeah, I think when I was younger and in high school, I more immediately took civil and thought of dirt. And I was like, yep, they're the dirt engineers. And then you learn later, you're like, oh no, they do all these other different things. So I'm always fascinated on all the different paths you can go with civil engineering. Based on what you do as a transportation engineer, what other disciplines are you working with on a regular basis for a bridge renovation, for instance?
So for most of the projects, I'm primarily working on civil engineers with those other specialties like geotechnical engineers that are focusing on like the foundation of the structures I'm working on. But I do also work with environmental engineers a lot, for different permits and stuff that we need in terms of that. Sometimes environmental engineers also help on the stormwater kind of side of it too. But I also work with other disciplines as well. Like when we talk about movable bridges, like the Burlington Bristol, sometimes that involves mechanical engineers as well as electrical engineers, because you need things that are moving or made to move, which is like the general of what I call our mechanical engineers, and electrical engineers, which those things that are moving need power. So a lot of things. Again, I know I'm simplifying what mechanical engineers and electrical engineers do, but that's usually my times that I'm coordinating with them as a civil engineer.
Yeah, well, it makes me kind of think differently, because you don't need an architect necessarily for a bridge. So I'm not used to kind of everything that goes into a bridge. I know the different control joints and understand how a bridge moves based on my education, but everything kind of comes together is always fascinating. Can you?
And then, oh, sorry, I was just gonna say, and then on your side, of course, as you know, but for folks that are listening in, of those who work on buildings, are working with architects a lot. People that are specialties on HVAC, like there's a lot of different things on the building side too. So there are other disciplines that folks are working with for a variety of projects.
Yeah. And I know one of the blessings and curses of being an architect is now I can't walk into any building without like hyper analyzing and judging everything. Can you go over a bridge without analyzing it? Or are you always
To a
looking at it?
degree. The joke I make with my partner is if I'm not driving, I'm always the one, like if we're going under a bridge, I'm looking up, because usually the underside of the bridge is where you get to see more things than for most of the bridges. Like a lot of the bridges you see are like concrete box beam and there's not really much going on, or sometimes you're on the highway and you don't even realize you're going over a bridge. So that's the kind of part of it. So I don't know if I hyper analyze every bridge that I'm going over or under, but I definitely do like looking at them or pointing out different things that are a little bit unique. Like if you don't see a K-frame bridge all the time, I know I always like to point out those because those don't really exist too much anymore.
Yeah, definitely. And then do you have any advice for other professionals collaborating with civil engineers? Are there things that are more helpful for you along your way?
Nothing that immediately comes to mind. I think civil engineers, in the sheer size of the projects that we're working on, we're usually thinking the big picture. Well, big picture, and then also having to look at the small details as well. But I think sometimes making sure that we go back to that big picture of the overall project, I think helps in terms of that communication and collaboration.
So jumping over to all the different organizations that you are a part of, I know you've been on a number of boards. Can we go through them and see what they're about, what's going on, and what people can get involved in organization-wise from the engineering side?
So the first organization that comes to mind is ASCE, or the American Society of Civil Engineer. For those listening that are not in civil engineering, there are discipline-specific professional societies, regardless of the one that you are in. So like ASME is mechanical engineering, but ASCE was the first organization I joined on campus because they made it really easy, because ASCE membership is free for students. So that was pretty easy. So I got involved with ASCE my first year of college, kind of went through the ranks, and ultimately ended up as vice president by my last year at Drexel. And I'm still involved with ASCE now in a variety of different ways, but one of the ones I'm most proud about is that I'm the current chair of CDL, our Committee on Developing Leaders on the society level, which I get to work with a fantastic team of ASCE members from around the world working on the different projects that we're working on. So that one's been really, really cool. Another organization that I'm highly involved with is SWE, or Society of Women Engineers. Similar to ASCE, I joined my first year. That was not free for students, but it was still definitely worth the membership price. Held a variety of roles as well. In Drexel SWE, I actually ended up becoming president during my junior into senior year, which was really cool. That was also its own awesomeness, because I think at that time we had a board of like 22 people. So that was a challenge in itself. And like, I learned so much about time management, event planning, so many different things through that role. And then still involved with SWE on the society level, helping with their awards and recognition program. And then also helping,
how does that how does SWE change from the education side to practice side, I'll call it?
Which is really funny, because that was immediately what I was about to go into. SWE has sections at universities, so like they had one at Drexel, but they also have local sections as well. So I'm also part of Philadelphia SWE, and I help them with their social media, which is a kind of nice, more role that I've helped them with for a few years now. And that's just really nice because then I get to kind of hear what all of the Philadelphia Suite people are doing throughout the time, which is nice. So I'm connected to all of them. But if you don't live local to a local suite section, they do have MALs, which anyone can join as well. So if you're not local to the one, they will do things that are more like virtual. And then the society has awesome events that they'll also hold in person and virtual.
What's the virtual one called?
That just
MALs?
variety of events that they'll have. Oh,
Okay.
the MALs, yeah, the MALs. But like even on the society level over the last, I'll say 10 years, the society now has these things called AGs or affinity groups, kind of like workplace ERGs that they've have on a variety of different identities, LGBTQ plus, veterans, first generation, career stages. There are now an early career, mid-career, and a late career stage AGs that they host in person and virtual events, which is really cool.
Stepping back to like more of the student outreach portion from the first organization, are you outreaching to college students, or does that go all the way back to high school students?
My STEM outreach I call it the K through 12. So I do try to focus on kindergarten or younger, but usually it's kindergarten is that first age that I'm really talking to 12th grade in terms of the STEM outreach I do, which is a great transition into the last organization that I'm part of. It's WTS, or Women's Transportation Seminar, and that's where I've done a lot of my STEM outreach in terms of getting women more excited about the transportation industry, or even just kind of knowing what's in that field. A few years ago, I used to run WTS Philadelphia's Transportation U program, which is a mentoring program for girls ages 13 through 18 who are just interested in the transportation field. And we kind of talk about different parts of transportation that's not all engineering. We need a variety of different backgrounds, which is really cool. On that marketing side, our financial side, so many different things that go into it. But now, as of 2023, so the beginning of this year, I was promoted to WTS Philadelphia Student Outreach Director. So now I oversee the Transportation U program and the leads that run that, as well as our scholarship program and our student chapter, which has been a really cool part of keeping that STEM outreach part of it, which is one of my passions, and getting to do that, where I get to now have more of a larger impact now as the director role.
Yeah, and then is that program like shorter stint, like a summer camp, or is the program longer, like over the full school year?
It is over the school year. Their general cadence is like every other month they have one event. But yeah, they try to match the school year, and then they'll do they'll do some smaller events throughout the year as well. Like, for example, we were recently partnering with the Free Library of Philadelphia to do a small little event there, do a hands-on activity with them, and then, talk about what we do as Transportation U, which is kind of cool.
And then how do you manage all of this and your time? Do you have time management techniques that you do? Balancing, delegation? What advice do you have for somebody?
Yeah, a lot of those things, a lot of that all together, I guess, is the better way of that. The first thing is I live by my calendar. If it's not on my calendar, I'm going to forget about it. So making sure that as soon as I know about, that our student chapter is having an event, I put that on my calendar so that I can block that time, or make sure that I don't double book myself, which can, when you're doing so many things, balancing that. But also just making sure that I keep myself like active to-do list of when I have an action that I need to do. But also, as you said, delegating is a very important part of the roles that I have, if I've learned anything, I can't do all of this by myself. Similar to what I do as a civil engineer, I'm not doing this entire design of a bridge by myself. I'm working with a great team that has different strengths that I can lean on those strengths for different things. So definitely of the delegating part, but also setting boundaries. We're different divisions, so it's okay. But I don't know if you are a Steelers fan, but I am a Philadelphia Eagles fan. And one of my boundaries is making sure I don't schedule anything during an Eagles game. So it's also things like that where it's like I still do all of these things, but people know I'm not available during an Eagles game.
Yeah, I thought you were gonna say the boundaries Harrisburg.
Oh no. just Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, no, I'm proud Steelers fan. You can say quote proud. We're probably our own worst fans and being harsh on it. But I will say, as long as New England doesn't win, sorry for any New England fans, I will root for Philly over New England because I do have family in Philadelphia as well. So
that was what I was going to say. I can agree with that. If the Patriots lose, we're both happy. Perfect.
yeah. But if you ever need a bunch of bridges to add to your portfolio, we have plenty that aren't doing so hot over here. So you can always come and check out our bridges that need updates.
Yes. Yeah. The city of bridges. I have been there a few times. That it is, I think, a 5.5 hour drive.
Yeah.
But it is a beautiful city and lots of bridges. So I'm always happy about that.
Yeah. Did your office freak out whenever the bridge collapsed in Pittsburgh? Like, I feel like your office would have been like, oh, what's going on over here? Figure out what's going on.
A little bit. I think our natural thing is, okay, well, what's happening? Like, proactively, okay, it happened. We can't go back.
Yeah.
You know, the collapse happened, of like, okay, what's proactively happening? What emergency repairs or emergency, even just getting people out there. And then just, again, especially the one that happened in Pittsburgh, like, thankfully there were no fatalities. So that's a really nice part of it. Unfortunately, it's not always the case, but I think it was very much the proactive as opposed to the reactive that typically happens when we have a collapse like that. And then hopefully, I don't do it as much now, but kind of on that note, we have an organization through the Federal Highway Administration called NBIS, or the National Bridge Inspection Standards. So if you didn't know, any bridge is inspected at least once every 24 months. That 2-year mark approximately, every bridge is inspected. Our older bridges are typically inspected more frequently, but that's like the minimum of that. And it's, you know, a specific standard that people have to go through that are bridge inspectors. Back at that time when I was doing bridge inspection a little bit, I had my CBSI, or Certified Bridge Safety Inspector, certification as part of that. So the people that are doing it also have those things to make sure that they know how to be doing their job for inspecting bridges.
What else did you want to share for those looking to study engineering or going through the process on kind of what you do and how you've gotten there?
I would say don't be afraid to reach out to people. If you see someone and you're like, oh, you know, bridge inspection sounds pretty cool. I know you don't do that anymore, but can we talk about that? Like, don't be afraid to reach out to someone and ask them about their career path or even how they got there. In terms of, you know, folks that are already in civil engineering and studying civil engineering, and the classes are getting hard, don't be afraid to ask for help. I know I went to office hours. I went to the tutoring center that we have through the College of Engineering when I was struggling with classes. So don't be afraid to ask for help when you are struggling with a class.
That's fantastic advice, because I know I've even hit my own classes that were a lot harder than others. But I wanted to thank you so much, Dani, for spending the time to speak with me today. I am sure we've inspired some professionals into going into civil engineering, or understanding transportation is an option if you are studying engineering right now. So thank you so much, Dani.
And thank you so much for having me.
And how can people get a hold of you if they've got questions about anything we've talked about today?
Yeah, I will give you my email that you can hopefully add in the show notes, and that you could reach out to me there.
Yep, I will definitely add that. And I can also put in like your LinkedIn. Everybody can check out the show notes below to ask Dani any questions, or if there's other engineering disciplines you're looking to study, you can reach out to any one of us. I'm more on the building side, but anything else, I know Dani has connections all around Philadelphia that she can help you with. So thank you again, Dani. I hope you enjoyed our discussion today. Check out the description below for any resources, links, and contact information we discussed. Did you like the conversation today? Is there something you'd like to know more about, or a topic I should cover? Leave me a comment below, and I will see what I can do to best answer your questions. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel. It does really help others be able to find this resource to have larger conversations. So leave me a comment and subscribe. I really appreciate your support.